From deep in the Burbank Media District, it's time for another edition of My Burbank Talks, presented by the staff of My Burbank. Now, let's see what's on today's agenda as we join our program.
Hello, Burbank. Craig Sherwood here with you once again, along with Ross Benson.
I'm in a different seat, so where do I aim to? Hi.
There you go. And Ross, it's that time of the month again where it's our favorite show. It's Ask the Mayor. And we have Mayor Nick Schultz from the city of Burbank here to answer some questions and see what's going on in our fair city here.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always glad to be back here.
Okay. We're going to go here. There we are. Okay. So we're in June. It's kind of summertime now, and there's things are a little quieter than usual, but doesn't mean that there still aren't issues. There still aren't things going on and everything else.
Is that why he's not wearing a tie? But he is wearing this fancy.
But he's got the nice City of Burbank polo on.
Polos that the departments have changed to. It's the casual look. Mm-hmm. Here, go up just an inch and you'll be able to see. It's really good looking. I guess you guys have to pay for those, but they literally out of your pocket. But they're nice. It's
absolutely
a little nicer than wearing a tie today.
It's a whole lot better than wearing a whole suit and tie.
Absolutely. So let's start off with some things. Yeah. Let's start off with a little issue that Burbank got stuck in nationally. And a couple weeks ago, the LA City Council President Paul Krekorian, who, by the way, was a Burbank school board member at one time and representative in the assembly representing Burbank at one time, came up with a video of a homeless individual being dropped off in North Hollywood by Burbank police and didn't bother with a phone call to our police chief, our city manager, or yourself, the mayor, but he found every news media's phone number, called them up and said, please come look at my video. Look what Burbank's doing to our city. The video does not look good to a point, but it's out of context. So I'm going to let you kind of say where things are at. I'm sure you're disappointed in the fact that nobody calls you, in advance, say, hey, look into this a little bit or something. I'd say if he called you and then a week later you had done nothing, you put it on the media then.
Well, we were together that afternoon, you, Craig, and I at Bunt Cakes, Nothing But Cakes, and you said, I'm still waiting.
Yeah. Well,
so let's get into that. I'll let you get into that and let you get your thoughts on it.
Sure. Well, regrettably, it's June 18th, and I'm still waiting for that call. However, the councilman's office did reach out via email. And look, email is productive, but I always think if you get folks in a room or on a call, you can hammer out a lot of the issues. But look, we are, despite maybe the misgivings that I have about the way in which the councilman brought the issue to light, rather than picking up the phone, as you all know, my number's out there. It's not that hard to find.
I think we publish it under.
We have.
When we do this show.
And I get calls, by the way. So it was a little disappointing that he didn't feel that he could reach out to me. With all of that said, look, as you said, Craig, what we saw in the video, albeit at first blush, it was very concerning. And so Burbank Police Department takes the concern very seriously. We are doing a thorough and comprehensive investigation. And look, at the end of the day, when that investigation is complete, if there was any misconduct or wrongdoing by the involved city employees, then there will be an appropriate level of consequences. But what I will conclude with is this. There were a lot of folks coming to me asking more of a statement, either a full-throated defense of the officer or condemning the officers involved. Look, at the end of the day, we are talking about professionals that work every single day in the city of Burbank. They are public employees. They took an oath to wear the badge. I think we owe them a little bit of restraint in allowing the process to play out. We don't yet have all of the facts. We need to have all of the facts so that we can fully met out what happened here and was there any misconduct by anyone involved. So in closing, I'll just say this. Look, we still don't have yet all of the information. I hope that we will soon. And as I've said now probably twice, if there's any remediation that needs to be done with regards to our employees, we will certainly pursue that. But with all of that said, we take homelessness seriously in the city of Burbank. We understand that those who are unhoused in our community need connection to housing services. They need connection to wraparound supportive services to deal with the underlying reason that they find themselves in an unhoused situation. We have proven in the last several years especially that we want to be good regional partners. And so my invitation to Councilman Krekorian and all of our regional partners is, if you have a thought on how we can be a better partner, pick up the phone, give us a call. We want to work with you. I think that having press conferences for the sake of press conferences, while maybe good for the politician involved, isn't good for actually getting things done and solving the issue. And most importantly in all of this, caring for the gentleman that we saw on that video who desperately does need connection to housing and services.
Well, I just want to say, you made couple of very good points there. One, your day job, you're a deputy attorney.
Yep.
You deal with body-worn cameras daily. You look at footage and so forth. Those officers were wearing body-worn cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Everything they said, they did is recorded. What's said in the car to the gentleman and his answers are recorded.
Yeah.
So you see when this report is done, there's a lot more to it. Plus, you sat on that dais, home LA, breaking their behind to try to get people into places. You guys just last meeting or the meeting before, the piano store that you guys are finally moving forward, a resource center for homeless people.
Yeah.
The fire station that Home LA is going to be taken over for homeless people. Burbank's doing a lot. You can drive any street in Burbank and you won't find anywhere near the number of homeless people. And when I say homeless, this gentleman had some other issues. That's what the call kind of appears to be. But it just kind of gets me. You guys are doing, and again, I've heard from the police chief. I've heard from council members. There'll be a thorough investigation, right? Like everything else that they do.
Absolutely. And, the other thing I'll say is that in the course of the letter that I received from the councilman office and in response to his press conference, I'm not aware of any, but to the extent that there's any independent or outside investigation, the city will, as we always do, fully cooperate with that. But again, I always try to think about what would I hope if I was involved in any sort of situation, and perhaps this is my legal training showing through. I always believe in the presumption of innocence and having all of the facts before we condemn someone publicly. I take that very seriously, and I think that that's why right now we need to trust the process to play out, to gather all of the facts, and then we will respond accordingly. And I hope that folks around the region, look, I understand how politicians operate, and everybody wants that press conference or that headline. That is not always productive and compatible with good governance. And so right now, we need the adults at the table in the room looking at what happened and solving it, and we need less grandstanding.
And you work for the Attorney General's office. And he said in his press conference that, we're going to call the Attorney General. It's like Craig said, grandstanding. I mean, let's go down the list.
What bothered me is his staff was going to assist the person and got him the help and everything else. And the help was just, they called the paramedics. They brought him back to Burbank. And he's back laying on the street in Burbank 2 days later. They didn't help him. They didn't do it. But like you said, the bigger problem is not, the problem that faces Burbank right now is not this one individual. It's kind of threw a spotlight on it. But I did some research. And from Measure H. The city of Burbank has received 4.7% of the money that the citizens of Burbank have paid into Measure H. We have received 4.7% of that money back, which comes to something like we received back $2,216,000, and we've paid in $46 million.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And to me, the bigger issue is, we're struggling to do the Help Home Again LA at the old Station 13. We're struggling to get the Hollywood Piano Place. We're, money to be able to put restrooms in and everything else. And yet, all this money is going towards LA and other cities, and they're basically wasting it.
Yeah.
And we have a need for even if we got 25% of that money, we'd be helping people a lot better. So I think that's where the root problem is that we got duped on an election Measure H.
Well, the one other thing I'll just mention, Craig, because I do think it's important in all of this, is that, look, at the end of the day, despite my difference in approach, clearly from how the councilman handled the situation, I am glad in one way that it shed light on an issue, and I wish we had the opportunity, and I still am waiting for that call, because should the councilman call, I'd be happy to tell him about, there is a culture shift in Burbank. We're doing a lot of great work, setting a foundation, working towards our first homeless solutions center, our first shelter site, if you will, in the city of Burbank in about 24 months' time. To your point, Ross, we have a tremendous partnership with Home Again LA. Burbank is not in the business of pushing those who are facing crisis in our community, those who are unhoused, over our border into another city. And if it happens, then I'll be the first to announce it. So I hope that the councilman will take me up on this renewed offer to have that conversation. I'd love to tell him about what we're working on in Burbank. It's been a while since he's been here. And to reaffirm to him that we are good faith regional partners. And if he ever has a concern, and I am glad he brought the concern up, if nothing else, it's good to look into it, to have that transparency and accountability. But we need to do it in a more collaborative, friendly way, because at the end of the day, homelessness is not a Los Angeles problem. It's not a Burbank problem. It's a state of California. It's really a national problem. That's right.
Yeah, and it's too bad that the news media all decided to put that on. It was that day's video of the day, and now everybody's forgotten about it. There's no follow up or anything. That's why we did a follow up story today on it, just to say what was going on. But it just made Burbank look bad that one day, and national news picked it up, and it's unfortunate. So hopefully things get worked out. So.
Well, I think your follow-up, if people take a look at myburbank.com, there's your follow-up, and you will see where 2 days later, the gentleman was returned to Burbank.
Mm-hmm.
He was taken care of. Again, the officers asked him what he wanted. They got him what he wanted. They've taken care of him. How he keeps coming back to Burbank. Well, he said it. L.A. paramedics took and dropped him off back at the local hospital.
Yeah.
And that was at Parkside and Bob Hope, which is not
a block away.
The real hospital. Take him into your ER. We've talked to St. Joe's and so forth. So let's move on, because you have had an exciting week.
So the next question now, I need to preface it saying I am fully against wars and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, I'm personally a little, I feel our time is, I don't want to say wasted, but our time is being used by people with an agenda wanting the Burbank City Council to take up the war with Israel and Gaza and Palestine and all that and Hamas. And I think the people are well-meaning. I'm not saying they're not, but this is not city business. It's not the Burbank City Council. I don't think Israel's waiting to say, well, when the city of Burbank weighs in, then we'll make our decision. I just think, yes, we're probably one of a million voices out there, but we have a lot of our time being taken up in oral communications and as such by people wanting the city council to do something. And yes, it's symbolic only. So my problem is, why are we kind of, rules are you must only talk about city business. Is this really city business?
It's a great question, Craig, and here's why. I like to think of it as a continuum, a spectrum, if you will. So what's city business? I mean, certainly we would say the maintenance of our road, the provision of city services like police and fire, that's certainly city business. When I think about issues like this, I think back to some of the other issues we've tackled in my time on the council. We rescinded our friendship city status with the city of Hadrut once Azerbaijan took possession of the city. We have reaffirmed our commitment to the recognition of the independence of the Republic of Artsakh. And at first blush, you're right. Or even when there was standing in solidarity with Ukraine after the Russian invasion, a lot of folks rightfully say, well, what does it have to do in Burbank? It's a complicated issue because we have folks of Palestinian and Jewish descent that live in this community that are impacted by this ongoing warfare and death in the region. And so the question then becomes, what's the appropriate level of involvement from the city? So look, at the end of the day, anyone can come before the dais, they can come before the council, they can ask the council to take action, and we're not going to limit that because in Burbank, as you both know, we have always prided ourselves on our accessibility and our belief in that First Amendment right. What I will say, though, is as much as people are asking for a city council resolution, and I guess we'll be talking about that on Tuesday night, or I guess now it's a letter that Councilman Anthony would like us to consider sending to the Biden administration. I always think, look, at the end of the day, the United States involvement in the Gaza region is really decided by the executive branch, the Biden-Harris administration, as well as the Congress. And so I think the most valuable thing that we can do as local leaders, I have Adam Schiff's cell phone number. I've communicated with the congressman. I know our state senator. I know our other state senator. I think that we can and should, and I think that most of I don't know for a fact, but I believe my colleagues are expressing the concerns of the Burbank community in our conversations with our federal representatives. And really, at the end of the day, they're the ones who have the ability to decide what gets funded, what armaments are shipped, what relations we have with foreign powers. I think that's the best way that we can advocate whatever side of the issue you're on here. And that's hard because people don't always see that advocacy, but you both know I'm in DC several times a year. I'm in Sacramento several times a year. We advocate for Burbank. I think that that's maybe the least often noticed and yet the most effective channel that we have to really voice the perspective on Burbank of issues like this.
Anything, Ross?
No, I agree. It's a hard one because people are real passionate when they get up to speak. I know, like Craig and I, we listen to council. We're not there, but when you go to phone calls and there's sometimes a dozen that this is all they want to talk about. It doesn't matter what else is happening in the city. This is what they're concentrating on, and sometimes it's a little frustrating. Hopefully, if a letter does get written, if that's the final decision, maybe some of these people will, understand we've done our part. There's no more that we can do.
Well, the other thing I would add is that I know there's always frustration and concern with how long it's taken this and other agenda items to come back. But the thing that folks forget is that, when we set our goals, which now we're doing we tried it this time on a 2-year cycle. So we set it last January when the new council was seated. Look, at the end of the day, the council agrees. We sit down and agree and say, these are going to be the priorities. Not that we won't touch these other very important issues, but issues of housing and homelessness, maintaining public services, quality of life, the environment. These are the things that we have all agreed to as being the top priority items. So yes, you can come before the council and ask for a resolution or a letter, but we have to balance and fold that into all of the other work product that we've already agreed to prioritizing. And so that's why I know it can be frustrating, but look, if you think the council should have a different set of priorities, you will have your opportunity in January with a new council seated. And I encourage everyone listening to show up and tell the council what you think we should work on.
Well, you just said your goals, and other council members have always reminded me, you guys don't have a crystal ball.
No.
There's no crystal ball that you are handed when you become a council member. We have some other issues. State of California saying you will build how many residential houses in your city in a certain amount of time. That weighs because they can penalize us. That will affect us for years to come.
That's right.
You have just everything. Did we ever think that we would have a pandemic that shut down our, locally, everything. Our studios are still suffering. So there's a lot of things you can't see in that crystal ball, and people, I think, have trouble seeing that sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, when you do get the letter, you can give it to one of your new best friends. That's our next little subject here. One of the fun things you get to do as mayor is when dignitaries, and the nice thing about having our own airport right here, is that
yes.
When dignitaries do fly into town, and the First Lady of the United States, FLOTUS, as she's known as, you usually are able to go to the airport and meet her and greet her on behalf of the city of Burbank. And I understand that not only did you get to greet her on Saturday, but you got to jump in the motorcade, and you also went to the big event. Hosted by Jimmy Kimmel with two ex-presidents, or an ex-president and a current president. Yeah. So tell us about your experience.
Yeah, so yes, that's right. The mayor of Burbank is typically invited to greet any dignitaries that are visiting our city. So president, first lady, vice president. Since taking on the role in December, I think this was my fourth time meeting Dr. Biden, and she's really terrific. So yeah, they land at Burbank Airport. They pull in on the north end of the airport near Millionaire, that private entry area. So this normally they fly in the blue and whites, and then Ross was telling me, I think she's on a military plane this time.
Yeah, I was texting you, kind of watching, and I knew the ballpark when she was arriving, but that experience that you've gotten to now 4 times, I think you've beaten all the other mayors in our city on meeting, but it also goes to show us how many times they're coming to California. I mean,
a ton,
quite a bit.
We are the ATM here.
we are
the ATM here.
Didn't they walk away with $30 million?
Yes.
From,
yeah, about
event?
30 million.
What was it like being in a motorcade? What was that? How was that experience? That must have been fascinating.
So here's the backstory, and then I'll get into the detail. So I had already been invited by the Biden-Harris campaign to attend the event as a dignitary for the city of Burbank, as the highest-ranking Democratic elected official. So I was planning to go. And then Thursday afternoon, Sandy George, our executive assistant, is out, and I see the email come in from the White House. I've corresponded with this person a few times, and they said, well, First Lady is arriving in Burbank. Would you be willing to greet her? So, of course, I say yes. And then I explained the predicament of, okay, so she's landing at about 5:15. And I think she was actually late, Ross. It was much closer to 5:30. Then the doors close at 6. And so, I was...
Are you looking at your watch going, we'll never make it?
We're never going to make it.
I'm sure there'll be an exception for her, though. I'm sure that's going to happen.
It's true. So I'm in touch with my contact in the Secret Service, and they said, well, in this instance, we can have you not in the in the vehicle she's driving in, but we can have you hop in one of the staff vans with all the press and the other staff members who got off the plane. So they put me in this white van, and I go wait at the back. And it was the most surreal experience ever, because there I am going down the 5. They're pulling traffic off to the side. I'm like 3 cars back behind the First Lady. We go all the way downtown to LA Live. We pull into the Peacock Theater, and the Secret Service, I mean, they were incredibly gracious in their handling of me. They got me right to my seat, like moved me in past the security line super quickly. Like it was, it takes me back to the first time I met Dr. Biden at the airport. I couldn't think of anything to say. So I was like, how was the trip? And she probably said this line like a million times, but she turns to the plane, a blue and white on that experience. And she's like, well, this is the best way to travel. I can now see exactly what she's meaning. I mean, it's reminds me of one other joke President Biden said Saturday night. And he was like, it's funny. Once I took office as president, there's no traffic on the roads. It's unbelievable.
But presidents are not allowed to drive either.
Yes.
Well, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I monitor CHP, and I've watched their detail work. It's just amazing how precise. And like you said, you looked at your watch. I texted my son. I said, what time showtime? And the president walked in at a certain time, and he said, Jill's not here yet, and they move. I mean, when you want to get across town,
that's the way to go.
Don't expect that, your whole mayorship.
No.
But I'll tell you, and there was a Dodger game
at the
same time, but it didn't matter. The first lady needs to get somewhere, and her staff, and with you in it.
Yeah.
But I texted you didn't answer me. Did that van take you back to Burbank, or did you Uber back to Burbank?
No, I Ubered back to Burbank. I lifted, actually, but yes, okay. I did that. The other fun thing I'll say is great event, really well attended. President Obama had great remarks. President Biden did too. But the fun part was there was a small reception afterwards, and I had a chance to run into our good friend, Councilman Paul Krekorian. And so I went up to him and I said, hey, it's me, the mayor of Burbank. I've been waiting for your call. So, I think he has my number now, and hopefully we'll connect this week. So Saturday night was
And
fun.
what did his stutter sound like?
You know, I will just say I don't think he was expecting to run into me there, but he was very polite, very professional, and I look forward to a good
And did you say, I rode in the motorcade with the first lady? How did you get here?
Nah, I probably should have done that.
No.
But it's pretty, these details. I mean, you were in with the president, with former president. You were with Jimmy Kimmel. That was probably a laugh and a half in itself.
Yeah.
And I guess Black with
Jack Black.
Jack Black got to perform, and
George Clooney, Julia Roberts.
Did Jimmy Kimmel have his guy with him, his security guard?
No, I don't think he was there.
Oh, he wasn't there, huh?
At least I didn't notice him.
But when you look back at your mayorship, there's a lot you're going to be, doing, and I would probably think these are probably some of the highlights of your lifetime of being mayor. When you stepped into that position, you have no clue what's going to go on, and you've been in it now for several months. These meeting the first lady, meeting dignitaries at the airport are kind of probably right up there and representing our city.
They are, and I will say I've had some good advice from a couple former mayors, and they all say, look, when you're a council member, even the vice mayor, I mean, the work is always there, responding to emails, meeting with constituents. But when you take that step to mayor, it's so much more work because now you're representative of the city.
You're the face of the city now.
Exactly. And so whether it's a crisis that you weren't expecting on a Friday afternoon and the press is calling you, or the First Lady's landing, you're always on and you're always expected to carry yourself with a certain air, a certain professionalism, a dignity that's really deserving of Burbank. People want to look at their mayor and say, that's someone that I believe in. They represent my values. They speak for me, or at least they're not embarrassing the city, right? Like that's the goal.
So I'm curious, you've met her 4 times, you said, at the airport. Mm-hmm. Do you say, welcome to Burbank, the media capital of America? Or do you have a set line?
The world.
The world?
The first time I think it was, welcome to Burbank, the media capital of the world. Now we're on pretty talkative points. Hey, how you doing? How's the flight? How's the president? And at first, she had clearly no idea who I was. But now I've met her enough that she's like, okay, I think I kind of know you. I don't know if she know my name, but she definitely knows me by sight.
I guarantee they have staff members on the plane saying, okay, when we get there, so-and-so and so.
I'm sure they do.
Oh, yeah, I remember him. So I'm sure.
But let's... You said Allie, your wife, was able to go with you, and she is the first lady of
Burbank. Yes,
they got a good kick out of that the first time they met, because I think this was Allie's 3rd time meeting the first lady. So I try to always go with Allie, and then I will say we've been joined a couple times. We had Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors Chair Lindsay Horvath with us when we met the First Lady this time. We've had Supervisor Solis. We've had Mayor Karen Bass from the city of LA. So sometimes it's just me. Sometimes we're accompanied by other dignitaries. But there's always something very special when the mayor of Burbank can say, welcome back to Burbank, Dr. Biden.
Wow.
I think when a plane lands in Burbank and says United States of America, and somebody gets off, that in itself is a big deal.
Huge.
How many airports are there in the United States that never see anything like that? So it's a great perk, and we're very happy for you.
These are memories I'm going to carry for a very long time, and I like to think that if nothing else, I'm leaving the First Lady with a very positive impression of our community, and I know my wife does her part to help too.
Well, and she works at Universal. We will say NBC Universal on a show, and she's around some big celebrities and some very high-profile people. But when you're with FLOTUS, and Allie's not that tall, but the doctor looks up to her, I bet, and is impressed by every time she is just. It's great when she had her entourage. Not Allie's, but the FLOTUS.
Not yet.
Things, move along real well, and
they do. And I will say, I know we got other topics, but I will say Dr. Biden she's the real deal. Like, when you see her, when you hear from her, she's thoughtful, she's intelligent, she's a very kind person, very sweet. And that's exactly what you get in real life. I mean, I was there and she was talking to Karen Bass, asking her how the family was. She's just a real person who just happens to be First Lady, and to get to know her even in this very small, sliver of her life, it's really cool to see that, you know, the people that are running our country, that are at the highest levels of our government, are married to the president. They're real human beings, just like you and me. They got all the same anxieties.
Well, she
and
takes her
concerns.
job as important as you take your job, which is, it's a mutual respect and admiration there, which is
That's right.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you. You know, and that's a nice thing about doing this show, you know, Ask the Mayor, because you don't get to share this on the dais. You know,
No.
in your council comments, you'll probably say, I welcome the FLOTUS on Saturday, blah, blah, blah. But in this show, we've gone a little deeper and learned some neat stuff that you were in the back of the bus, but
I was on the bus.
you made it on the bus.
Well, let's move on. We had to get a little more serious again.
Okay.
We got something coming up on the agenda, which you're going to start working on. Now, I just wrote down on my notes rent control, which, of course, it's not really rent control, but it's the slippery slope right now in Burbank. There's two sides that I really believe both sides have very legitimate arguments and everything else. I've seen it from Ross's point of view. I've seen it from a lot of things. So I know that you guys are about ready to embark on this journey. So what do you have for us on I guess rent? Is it what exactly are you calling it? It's not rent control.
Yeah. So we use the term rent control because it's good, easy shorthand, but I like to think of it as two separate but related components. So let me talk about what's going to be on the agenda for Tuesday night, this upcoming meeting. So we've talked about a rent cap, and really what we're talking about is rent stabilization, the concept of should the government regulate the year-to-year growth that a housing provider can charge in rent. So under state law right now, you cannot, under any circumstance, generally increase the rent by more than 10% year to year. Now that adjusts based on inflation. I think this upcoming year in August, it's going to be 8.9%, if I'm not mistaken. Other jurisdictions have said it needs to be much less than that because 8.9% still outpaces most wage growth. We are not talking about a cap per se on Tuesday night, but what we are talking about is what is the appropriate level of outreach that our staff needs to do in the next 90 to 120 days. So how many town hall style meetings? Are we going to put out a survey? How else are we going to gauge where the community's at in terms of their concerns and their needs for us to act in this area? So that's the first thing Tuesday night. So we've already appropriated the money, and it's really staff's opportunity to come back and say, this is what we'd like to do in the next 3 to 4 months to make sure that we capture a true cross-section of where the community's at on this. And then at the end of that period of time, then the council will hopefully have more information to decide what's the right move here. What is the right play? Do we touch state law? Do we not? But of course, we got to hear from our community to do that.
Well, as Craig says, I'm on one side of that. I'll share it with you.
Mm-hmm.
I got that $285 rent increase last year.
Yeah.
And last week I got a $291 for this year.
Oof.
Add those two figures together.
A lot of money.
And I tell you, yeah, it is. It's like crazy. I get it. The first year we went through COVID and they hadn't raised my rent a couple, but now they're going to the maximum that is permissible. And that, our water and power, you're getting an increase there.
Yep.
I'm sorry, that dozen eggs at the market are getting harder to buy.
You're right.
I lived in Burbank all my life, and it's happening all over. So when I listen to you guys talk about it, I take a deep breath and a heavy swallow.
Well, and Ross, I know we the three of us have talked about it more on the show in the past. Look, at the end of the day, to your point, Craig, I do think there's common ground here. We're all struggling to keep up with the rising cost of everything. I think in the long term, we have to add more housing options. If we construct more housing, we alleviate the market pressure. That's the long-term solution. I know you both know I could go on and on about it. I won't. But then the question becomes, what do we do for all those residents like yourself who in the short term still live here? Maybe a new unit in 5-10 years will be great, but you need help right now. And then the question becomes, what's the appropriate, level of government intervention? One option the council could pursue is a rent stabilization ordinance, capping rent at some amount less than state law. But that has questions that we need to answer too, including who'd oversee it, how do you fund it, what are the unintended consequences that we need to potentially guard against. All of that, I'm not going to say it's all going to be answered in the outreach, but I think these are the kind of things that we want to explore in our outreach.
And I get, Craig has brought up a couple of times, as a landlord, you have an air conditioner going out, and we're going to have 100-degree heat this next week.
Got to replace it.
A new
roof.
Yeah, all those things.
How do you do a roof that's what, $60,000?
Oh, about $25,000.
Yeah, and all those things. We get it with landlords. It's nice that Burbank does have quite a few of those landlords that have bought years ago when they worked at Lockheed and been around. But it's like, ouch.
Well, and to your point, Ross, we can't look at the other side of this equation as the enemy. At the end of the day, tenants are just trying to survive in a very tough economy. And look, I'm not talking about the big corporations, but the mom and pop housing providers, the people that bought their home, that are trying to rent it out, that want to have a good home to offer the community. We want them to stay in business. We don't want to lose those housing options. So there's got to be a way to balance all of it. And I don't know, I wouldn't presume the council has figured out the whole answer yet, but I have a feeling that by doing this outreach over the next few months, robust outreach, as Councilmember Mullins like to call it, I think we're going to have a better idea of where folks need the help and what we can do.
And I think, you've said it at every meeting. Council members Mullins has said it, let's have a town hall. But again, you want to do a big outreach. If it's signs on every corner, it's just you got to get to everybody, landlords and tenants, and work it out.
Yeah, I don't think there's any easy, there's no easy answers, but I do think after listening to the council talk about this numerous times now that you guys are starting to come to not a middle ground, but you're starting to come up with thinking about some solutions. And, I do like the fact that you're talking about maybe getting a city attorney and having its own separate, department and its own separate function, because let's face it, the Landlord Tenant Commission, as they're very good and well-meaning people, and they really try, but they're worthless. They can't do anything. They have no power. They have nothing. And that's got to be frustrating to people who go to them for help. And they say, hey, well, we called, and he says, forget about it. And they go, is that it? And they go, yeah, we're sorry. We can't do any more, So
been there, done that.
Yeah, it's a real tough thing for those people who are looking for help, that if we need to have that new department, we need to have that new department then, because that's the reality of what we live in today.
Well, and the other thing I would add, so going back to the idea of rent control. So we've talked about rent stabilization. We've talked about the city attorney's proposal to have this housing enforcement section that goes after the bad actors. The other thing that I would say is that we also have to talk about eviction protection. So in the month of July, the city staff is going to be bringing back an ordinance that we approved last year, the Tenant Protection Ordinance, which was the first of its kind in Burbank's history. What that ordinance said was, if you are evicting someone because you want to do a substantial renovation or remodel of the property, you have to give them more than just the 1 month of rent that's provided by state law. We required 3 months for first and last month's deposit on a new place and moving expenses. We did not touch any of the other categories that are provided for in state law to evict a tenant. So the question we're going to be talking about on Tuesday, I think it's July 16th or 17th, that third Tuesday of July, we're going to be looking at, should all of these reasons be permissible to evict a tenant? And if so, what is the appropriate amount of compensation? And I've said it before on the dais, and I'll say it again. If you're evicting someone in the middle of their lease term, the way I look at it is you're breaking a contract. And look, there might be very real reasons like moving in a sick relative where you do need to do that. So what's the appropriate level of compensation to make up for the damage to the person who was expecting to be there the next 6 months or 8 months or whatever, and now they need to go find a new place to live? These are the questions we're going to be answering in July. So the issue is very much alive and well, and in my humble opinion, it continues to be one of the very top issues that the City Council is grappling with here in the middle of 2024.
I agree. I think it's something that's going to. I think you guys are on the right track, but I think it's very complex.
It is no easy, quick answers,
no,
right?
Not at all. Let's move on to well, actually, this would say we're recording this on what was today's date? The Today's the 18th, right?
Today, yep.
Today's the 18th. We're recording this, and this morning you actually went over to the Burbank Chamber of Commerce, who hosted a digital restaurant, a way of helping restaurants in today's world. I thought it was a very interesting concept. I don't know, did they talk about like the Grubhub and DoorDashes and all that? Because sharing a quick little story. A lot of times I'll get a sandwich from Jersey Mike's, and I wind up paying $19, $20 for the sandwich. And I went into the Jersey Mike's, and it was like $13. And I'm going, wait a second. So not only are you paying a lot more, but then you're also paying their fee, and then you're paying a tip. And I can see where restaurants are really, struggling through it. So what went on today? I know you went there to help the chamber and get involved with our Burbank restaurant people. So what was that all about today?
Yeah. So there were a couple really great things that we took away from this town hall. So this was the first town hall I've had a chance to help MC as mayor, and I want to thank, of course, the Chamber of Commerce for hosting it. Our guest speaker was Joe Reinstein from the Digital Restaurant Association. This is actually a national association. They do lobby in California, but they represent restaurants of every kind, but their real focus are mom and pop restaurants like the Talleyrand, for example, like King's Deli, folks that are right here in Burbank that are grappling with the issue of, since the pandemic, we're in this new economy where people are using Grubhub, Chow Now, Uber Eats to order food online. The issue is that people think they're ordering directly from the restaurant, and they're not. They're actually ordering through this third-party platform. And in my humble opinion, from what I've heard so far, there are inadequate protections for our small businesses. So these platforms don't necessarily have to share your customer information with the restaurant. You think that they would, but they don't have to. So what happens at the end of the day if your order gets messed up or it doesn't get delivered correctly? You're probably going to take to Yelp and you're going to complain about the restaurant, when in fact it's the platform's responsibility for your poor experience. And right now, the restaurants don't really have a good method to ensure that there is good data sharing of all these folks that are buying their product, but they don't get access to the data to market them. And then, of course, there's lack of fee transparency. So, we get the bill and we see the total and it will say service charge, but we don't really understand as consumers where all that money's going. I'll give you one more example. The owner of Chili John's was talking today and was saying that there was a rather large order that they had recently, and someone left the restaurant a $25 tip. And they were like, most people probably don't know that tip goes to the driver. None of it goes to the restaurant. I mean, people, of course, hopefully you tip your driver,
right?
But they're thinking that this tip is going to actually go to the chef in the kitchen. It doesn't. And so one of the things that the Digital Restaurant Association is doing at the state level and at the local level is really trying to push the state and local governments to require more transparency so that you as a consumer at least know what you're being charged, who's going to get paid what. And so you can make that choice, an educated choice of, yeah, I'll order from Chili John's tonight using, Uber Eats, or I'll drive down to the Talleyrand to pick up my meal, and that way I make sure that all of my hard-earned money is getting into their pocket because I really care about Karen. So those are the kind of things that they're advocating around, and I think that we all walked away with some good ideas of what we can do at the local level, and hopefully some of our local restaurateurs are now better connected and well-versed on the issue.
This sounds like what's the federal government's doing with is it Ticketron or they're not disclosing fees on the tickets and everything else. Ticketmaster, yeah. And used to be called Ticketron back in the old days. But they're not disclosing fees and everything else, and that they're now the federal government's actually got involved in a lawsuit with them, and the fee is outrageous. They don't do anything for that $3, $4, $5 fee. They're just there. If they're physically doing something or somebody had to do something and they had to pay somebody, that's one thing. But just the fact it's a digital transaction and you're paying a $3 or $4 fee per ticket for a digital transaction and you have no choice. It's either you buy the ticket through them or you don't go to the show because there's no way to buy it at a local box office. So I think that now that Grubhub is part of Amazon Prime, and everybody who has Amazon Prime now gets free Grubhub, that locks them in a little more into the system. So I think absolutely, I would love to see, our small mom and pop restaurants, how they can, how we can help them. I mean, the entire premise of food delivery was a great idea at one time, but now they found out how to make money at it.
Well, that's true. And I'll just say, one other thing, one thing that we talked about in today's town hall is the fact that it's not a level playing field. So, our local restaurant, everything from Coral Cafe to Talleyrand, they're doing their best to keep up. And obviously, with the limited bandwidth they have, they'll come to city council. They might call their assembly member or their senator. On the other end of the equation, you have huge platforms like Uber that are dumping literally millions of dollars in races across the state to get candidates that are favorable to them elected. What that means is that at the local level, from the restaurants themselves to local government, we need to be elevating some of these struggles that they're seeing to our state. We need to be doing things at the local level too, like looking at local business licensing requirements to make sure that Uber, for example, plays by our rules. But we also need to be elevating these stories up to the Capitol so people understand that, look, we want to be business friendly in California, and if you have a good business model and you're doing great, that's fantastic. But right now, big business is thriving at the expense of small business, at least in the restaurant context. And we do not want to lose some of these iconic staples of our community. And there's got to be a way to ensure, if nothing else, that there's fee transparency and that they have access to their customer data.
Well, I know some of these restaurants you listed off at Coral Cafe have their own employees delivering.
Yep.
Which, it's fantastic. There's a couple of pizza places in town that also, they have their own employees. And I'll tell you, I prefer using them because, the tip you're giving them stays with that driver. It goes, with that employee. And that's what, and if you seek it out, ask when you place your order, if you're calling in, but like I do know Coral, like I said, Coral Cafe, the guy now knows me by name.
Well, I think into your point, Ross, just to put a bow on it, my best advice to our residents is this. Look, trust me, as a working parent, I understand convenience, and it's so darn easy with Grubhub to order the food and have it delivered. But if it's a restaurant you really care about, if it means something to you, if you have the ability, drive on down there and pick it up. Not only will all the money get in their pocket, quite frankly, they'll be happy to see you because they do this because they love their work and they want to see a satisfied customer, right? So you'll make their day by picking it up yourself.
Restaurant business is I've talked to a ton of restaurateurs around town. There's not much money in it. You got to do it for the love, because when you are a restaurant owner, you don't go on vacation, because when you're enjoying your trip to Italy, the phone will ring and something didn't work. My brother reminded me in Hawaii, you don't go away because either the blender didn't work or the soda tap is plugged and doesn't work. What do I do? So as a restaurateur, you feel for them.
Yeah, you do.
Well, I think My Burbank needs to do a little investigative reporting on the entire thing in Burbank and see what numbers we can come up with on the disparities in numbers. I think that'd be a good investigation.
I agree. I look forward to reading that.
Right.
So I know we're kind of getting toward the end of our show, and you said you are going to take a little time off from the dais. I know we don't have a council meeting next week. We're dark, and I know you don't golf much, so you're not perfecting. You're driving.
No, I'm a terrible golfer.
But your city manager, I hear, drives a heck of a golf ball.
He does. Yeah, he I mean, he's, I don't know, semi-professional, one could argue. He's pretty good, and he gets out there.
Well, I have seen recently postings on social media that he's out with our young professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And as I talked to Justin, he says, I'm grasping a lot of what's going on in the community. So, he's not locked to his desk. I was with Courtney the other night, and she's loving her job.
Oh, yeah.
Justin was gone all week last week.
Yep.
Courtney said, nothing happened. She was kind of
that's why he left in June and not in March or.
Well, she was kind of disappointed, but like she said, she had full. You got some great executive management
We really
And
do.
the city runs well. And while as we said last night when we did our show, even though the council chamber is dark, and yes, it is dark, the lights are off.
We do. Yeah, we turn them off.
We hope
Well, that brings us to actually our last little question.
Great.
Which probably ties right into saving power at the city. Water and power rates are once again going to go up on July 1st.
Yep.
Voted for a couple years ago to go 2 years at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you want to, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of people coming to council and saying, why are you raising the rates again? So you want to kind of just give a little background on that and let people kind of warn people what's going to happen on their next bill?
Absolutely. So Burbank Water and Power sent a notice out to everyone who's going to be affected by the rate increases, which are all of us, all of our ratepayers. Now, look, obviously, some of us are going to, have more significant impacts than others, depending on your property type. But last year, when we went through our budget cycle, to your point, Craig, we adopted a 2-year series of rate increases. We're going to do the same thing next year. I mean, at least that's going to be the proposal, is to adopt additional rate increases. That'll be up to the next council to decide if they're going to approve it. But I can tell you that the reason we adopted these rate increases really fall into 2 or 3 buckets. On the one hand, Burbank Water and Power, as you both know, is some of the most reliable service, not just in our region,
Absolutely.
but in the state, and I would argue even in the country. But we do have aging infrastructure, power lines, water pipes. I mean, all of this stuff, some of it's approaching 100 years old. It does need to be replaced. Unfortunately, that's not a cheap fix. There are supply chain issues that we're dealing with. And so it costs, substantial capital to make these improvements. But the trade-off is we're trying to ensure the reliability of service so that you live in Burbank, you flip the switch, the power is going to go on. We're not going to have brownouts. You want to turn on your faucet, the water is going to be clean, drinkable. That's part of the reason for the increase. The other side of the equation is that the state has required us to move towards a carbon neutral economy, which means by 2045, phasing off of oil and gas and replacing that with renewable energy sources like wind, solar, and geothermal, just to name a few. So the problem with doing that is that those renewable energy sources are hard to come by. They're generally more expensive to produce. And then on top of that, there just aren't nearly as many. And so we're competing with Glendale and Pasadena and Los Angeles to get access to the very finite resources, which many times are out of state, have to be transmitted over long distances. So, in the long term, we need to generate more locally sourced renewable energy. But in the intermediate term, we have to be meeting these goals, because here's the last point I'll make. It's not just a goal on paper. The state has very serious financial consequences for cities that don't meet this goal by 2040. We're talking $100 million plus in penalties to the general fund of the city of Burbank if we can't meet this goal. And so, yes, it is tough. We understand right now that nobody wants to see a rate increase, but it's good for the environment. We have to do it, of course. It's going to have significant improvements to our infrastructure. And the one thing we'll continue to do is look at all of our financial assistance programs to really get help to those in our community who need it. Because I will just say, look, I'm trying to suck up all those rate increases that you're all dealing with too. I get it. It is not fun. Our budget's already as a household of 4. I mean, it's pretty tight. So I totally understand. But we also understand that households like ours can, afford to absorb that. And there are folks on fixed income in our community who really need the help. And so we want to continue to really strengthen and bolster our financial assistance programs so that nobody is at risk of losing their water, their power, their housing, etc.
Oh, that's a new issue coming up, and next year when they decide again,
yep,
people need to go to the city council and make their opinions heard about that entire thing, because, everything's old, everything's getting a lot older. Well, I think that's it for my questions, and we come to the part of the show, which hopefully is now your favorite part of the show, and that is what's on the mayor's mind. So, Mayor Schultz, you have the mic. It's all yours. What's on your mind?
I think what's on my mind is it's hard to fathom, but I'm at the roughly the halfway point of my mayorship, and it has been a tremendous experience. Talking about memories tonight, I mean, I've made so many. This has been the single most positive experience in my life, other than, being a husband to Allie and dad to Ella and Aiden. I mean, this has been the privilege of a lifetime. It's sad to think that I won't be on the council this time next year. So what is on my mind is our upcoming election to fill the vacancy that I'll be leaving on the city council. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you who to vote for, but what I will ask everybody who's interested or even just questioning, start checking out the candidates. Some of them are already announcing. I'm sure there'll be more who come up. My advice is start developing a list of questions, the things that you care about, and talk to the candidates. I know you both have brought this up many times in, commentary articles and on your podcast. We're a small community. You can literally reach out to any of the candidates, and I guarantee you they'll probably meet you for a cup of coffee. My advice is go to a meet and greet, invite them for a cup of coffee, ask these questions, and really get to know who you might be voting for on that November ballot. And right now over the summer, it's a really good time to do it because people aren't fully tuned in to the election in November. So July and August, candidates are trying desperately to make contact with voters. So, I know that My Burbank always does a wonderful job of asking the candidates and profiling their questions.
Yeah, we always do a question thing every year.
That's right. And that's probably the single best resource we have. But once you've tuned into the podcast or read the article, reach out to the candidate. If you want to know what they're going to do about pine trees on your block, whatever the issue is, big or small, now's the time to start plugging in, getting engaged, asking these questions. And as a voter in Burbank, I too will be looking at all the great candidates that have come forward so far. Who else is going to jump in? I look forward to learning more about all of them and then making my decision too about who I want to take that seat.
Well, let me do a shameless plug from My Burbank Talks. We do offer any candidate who wants to, we will do a podcast and bring out any candidate who wants to come on and do an episode. You did one.
It was great.
I'm sure you're going to be back again.
I'll be back
when we offer them again starting in August. So, I think I think we need to ask those questions. You need to find out who these people are in advance. Very important.
Well, and to your point, Craig, my final thought, if you have a question that you would want to ask all the candidates and you think others in the community might know, start sending your questions in to Craig and Ross. Send it into My Burbank.
I'll be glad to. Yeah, I'll be glad to actually ask those questions. I want to touch on the hard. As you know, you come in here. It's no fluff. We always
always bring the heat.
We get into it, But I think that's what's important. I mean, it's a very, very honest dialogue, which is all you can ask for.
It is.
Well, Ross, what you got?
I think what a great show.
It always is, you guys.
It always is.
Love it.
We're still going to make a goal before we're done with this to get on our Burbank bus.
We'll do it.
We're working on that. It's logistically it's a lot more than it is, but
well, I will share with you, and I told both our city manager and our assistant city manager, we talked to the czar.
Yes, we did. David Kriske.
David Kriske himself.
Oh, yeah.
Road King
what a great
Star
guy.
Show. He has agreed to come on a podcast, answer questions, right, like we ask of you, and tell us of some things that are happening in the city.
Yep.
He's running it by his boss and so forth. And even now, a lot of people, and I happen to know David for many years, he's a pretty shy guy. But when he gets up and he makes his presentations, he knows what he's talking about.
Oh, very good.
And he's the king of Burbank Bus.
You know what, Ross? Maybe we can do our entire Burbank Bus episode and bring David on the bus with us.
Oh, I love that.
And do the entire episode about Burbank transportation.
Great idea. I know he's willing to join us.
Good.
Because, again, like we have shared here, it's a great forum for people to know. We had people come up to us at the Road Kings podcast and go, My Burbank's the only way we're finding out what's going on. I will say our PIO in our city puts out a ton of stuff, but it's behind the scenes. It's the stuff like these shows that people are really enjoying. So
I totally agree. And thank you guys, just in closing, thank you for the service that you provide to Burbank. You guys are really our only independent media outlet that we have anymore. And just, week in and week out, you try to share the information with the community. I'm appreciative of it. I like, driving in the car or whatever I'm doing and listening to all the week that was. And you guys do a really great job with it.
Wait a minute. If you said Allie's listening, I better watch that when I use that 4-letter word.
You better, yeah.
So on.
We do listen to it together.
We do get letters. But no, we appreciate that. I'm always a little worried when I write things or say things. Oh, who's going to come after me next? But you know what? That's, to me, I think being honest and being real is more important than trying to put something phony on it. And
we got a thank you from Kevin Muldoon.
That's great.
Yes,
We got him on the podcast at the Road Kings Car Show. He brought up some Burbank stuff, but he's a longtime Burbank resident.
Oh, yeah.
Worked right there at NBC. But we want to hear from our community. Not only them sending us emails, but if you have a topic that you want us to dig into and you're not getting an answer, yes, we do have an ombudsman who takes care of that for the city. But if you want to know something about Burbank, ask Craig or I, because we would love to look into
you'll probably see Ross around a lot more than you see me. Anyhow, that's it for our June episode of Ask the Mayor. For Mayor Nick Schultz and for Ross Benson, this is Craig Sherwood saying thank you very much for listening, and we will be back with you in July. Thanks again.
My Burbank Talks would like to thank all of My Burbank's advertisers for their continued support. Burbank Water and Power, Cusimano Real Estate Group, UME Credit Union, Burbank Chamber of Commerce, Gain Credit Union, Providence St. Joseph Medical Center, Community Chevrolet, Media City Credit Union, UCLA Health, Tequila's Burbank, Logix Credit Union, Hill Street Cafe, Bertain Escobar Wealth Management, and the UPS Store on 3rd Street.